Hey everybody, it's Rajesh here.
Intane here.
Welcome to our podcast, Baskets of Knowledge, Chats with a Difference. In our podcast, we invite guests from around the country and around the world to talk about how they got to where they're at the moment. It's about a journey, it's about an experience, it's about their life. Kia ora koutou, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Baskets of Knowledge. Just before I jumped on, we were talking about what number it is. We've forgotten about the number, and it also doesn't matter where you are listening. It could be episode number 1 or episode 169. It doesn't matter. We're just really glad that you are joining us. Tane, how are you going, and what have you put into your Baskets of Knowledge since we last spoke?
Yeah, going good, thank you. I think probably the biggest learning I've had over the last couple of weeks has just been reflecting on, that we don't always have to be an inspiration to others or do all these inspiring things. I think, as I've continued into this transition period, there's been a lot of reflection, a lot of changes that have happened in my life. But I think, like I went to the gym today and that's the third time this week. And probably a month ago, I wasn't doing very much for myself in terms of physical activity or, doing things for me. And so I think I've just been reflecting on, you don't have to be that inspiration to everybody else. Sometimes you've got to focus on that inner self. And that's been a hard challenge for me because I've always been a people person. So it's definitely been a reflection and, yeah, something that I hope to, utilize to go, sometimes you do have to work on yourself. How long that takes is, obviously depends on the person and the situation, but it's been a really huge reflection, I think, for me to go, it's time to start putting some value back into myself so I can put value into the people that I work with or friends, family, etc.
Yeah, that's a beautiful reflection because I think a lot of the times we like to give to be inspiring, but actually, if you don't look after yourself, you can't do anything. So it's really important for you to bring yourself back to that, to ground zero on your base and go, right, cool, if I can inspire myself, that's all that matters at the end of the day. That's you're all that matters if you think about life in general. It sounds a bit selfish, but actually that's what matters at the end of the day. Um, and my learning is interesting. I went to this amazing conference on the other day, and it just blew my mind. But the one thing that one phrase that I really picked up was, um, when we're navigating storms, we don't we don't waste energy navigating the storm. We waste a lot of energy in resisting the change. And I was like, this is what happens. How many times do we just resist change and that takes our energy? And that really got me thinking about anything that we do in life. The resistance of change is where we waste our energy. And I think our speaker today might even talk about some of that in a different way as we go through the conversation. But hey, enough about us. As you know, we can keep speaking forever, but it's not about us. It is our pleasure, our absolute honor to invite our guest on today. This is a guest that I got to meet, I guess, a few months ago through a program that we are both doing, and I've heard them speaking a few times. They actually woke up at 2 a.m. to give a talk to us here in New Zealand, which is amazing dedication. 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. It was crazy time, whatever it was pretty crazy. But over the last few months, I've got to know them and their message. But beyond their message, they have a career pathway and a career that's really exciting and really interesting, but also full of lots of learnings, I guess. And hopefully, we get to go through those today. Um, Welcome to Baskets of Knowledge, Sneha.
Thank you. Thank you, Prajesh. Thank you, Tanya. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I love this not cross country, cross world, cross global interaction, right? So I love that we're able to do this also at a decent time for me. So thank you for that.
Exactly. It's only 2 p.m. in New Zealand and it's 7 p.m. in your part of the world. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. We can't complain, can we? And for people who
Yeah.
know nothing about you, they're not as lucky as I to have met you. Who is Sneha today on the 10th of August or 9th of August for you?
On the 9th of August. Yes, I'm living in your past. So things
Yes.
are still going okay. Hope the future looks good too. Sneha today is let me tell you a little bit of my background before I move to
Sure.
today. So my background is as a journalist. I was a newspaper journalist for a few years, and then I went into what I call creative recovery. I escaped the business right as the newspaper industry was beginning to tank, and I went to grad school and I focused on fiction. Actually, I got a writing degree in fiction. And After that, I went into higher ed communications, which was an interesting journey because it feels like you went on the dark side from a journalist perspective. You went to the PR side, but it was actually a really great shift in terms of feature writing and working with people who are really at the peak of knowledge and discovery and learning. And so it's just a great learning experience. And from there, I somebody believed in me. So I started writing speeches for the college presidents, two of them there. And it was amazing because my background is I'm a preacher's daughter, granddaughter, and great granddaughter. So I've heard a lot of speeches in my life. So it's something I think that's kind of embedded in me. And it was great to be able to um, use that to help leaders articulate what they want to say and express themselves in creative ways and new contexts. And from there, I went to UCLA and I was the executive speechwriter for the chancellor there. So I recently left a few months ago and I'm moving into the speaking space, an emerging speaker, but also independent as a writer. And that's my professional journey. I live in Los Angeles and make my home with a wonderful husband, my first and last husband. And he is from Ecuador. I am from India. It was a great intercultural marriage. And I grew up in a place called Rancho Cucamonga. It's a real place. People often
Okay.
ask. But it was a great place to grow up. And I'm a California native and love it and would love the chance to come to New Zealand. That would be amazing.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. I love that. I love that because, there's, like we said, there's two sides to everybody. There's the professional side and there's the personal side, and you've spoken and touched on each of those, which is really beautiful. I'm going to start back at your journey being a journalist. Was there something that you always wanted to do? Was it something that fell into your lap because of life, I guess?
That's a great question. So I grew up always reading. My nose was always in a book. I actually didn't know where I lived until I started driving because I was always reading in the car. So I couldn't find my way home. I was just a bookworm. And so I think writing was a natural progression, but it actually came to me, it crystallized for me in college. It was my third year of college. I was in my dorm. I was sick, sick, sick. I was so sick. And I couldn't bring myself to do anything, but I picked up two books by Anne Lamott. One is Bird by Bird, and the other one is Traveling Mercies. And Bird by Bird is a book on writing. I finished that book and I just knew. I was like, this is what I need to do. I need to be a writer. It just came together in the middle of that illness in that dark room with that book, as I'm squinting my eyes trying to read it. And it just all came together at that moment. And a couple months later, I got an internship at a newspaper through a contact that we had, a friend, and just jumped in with both feet. My first story was actually a front page story. It was on the Women's World Cup, and
Oh,
I had to
wow.
sneak into the stadium. I had no press credentials, but I had to sneak into the stadium, find my way in, and interview. So that was my journey to journalism, and I love the journalism experience because similar to what you do here on Baskets of Knowledge, it's a study in human behavior and the human condition, right?
It
You
sure
meet
is.
all kinds of people in all kinds of situations. And so it's just a fascinating study of who we are, why we do what we do, what motivates us. So that was my journalism journey.
What's so beautiful this now is the moment it happened is still memorable right now. You remember the,
Oh,
the
yeah.
books, you remember that moment there. As you said, the crystallizing moment is so clear for you. And as you think about that moment there, and when you spoke to your parents, say, hey parents, this is my pathway, what is their reaction? And it's always interesting about parents' reactions because parents always react to other oh yay. What is the reaction for you?
They were immensely supportive. They were never the kind that said you have to do X, Y, or Z, and these are your only options. My both of them were always supportive. My father always said you need to focus on your strengths,
Yeah,
and which is great, especially when you think about things like aptitudes and how we're wired. He always said focus on your strengths, and so my strength is strictly creative, writing, history, all those subjects, the math side of my brain is not fully developed. So I had no other choice but to go into writing. And it was just, they were super supportive. My dad kind of fed my habit of reading my whole life. He has an office with literally thousands of books covering the
Wow.
walls. And so I grew up sneaking into that office and grabbing books and reading things. And so he always cultivated that. And um, I would always save up my babysitting money to go buy either books or music. And whenever he came with me to the bookstore, like I'd kind of slip a book into his hand and he could never resist not buying it for me. So they were very supportive of my writing journey and excited and always affirming of my gifts, which is a gift to me, right? To have
Yeah.
that support in a somewhat non-traditional route of career. So
Yeah, and as you say, it's non-traditional, right? Because I'm gonna think about stereotypes. When you think about Indian stereotypes, families, they think about engineer, doctor, lawyer, and the same thing with me when I chose my career pathway. I was very lucky. My mom's a doctor, and my
yeah.
dad's in the health field, but they were both like, we don't actually care. You just do whatever you want.
Mhm.
Use just your strengths to find your passion. Even today, they're still my heroes, and they're like, right, cool. What are you doing now? What are you up to? It's not about a title, status, which is really beautiful. As I say, it's non-traditional in a lot of those
Yeah.
senses there. But what I did notice now is the word sneak. You snuck into the Women's World Cup, and you also snuck into your dad's office to do some reading. Is that a bit of a
You pick
trend there?
I actually had a nickname someone gave me when I was really little, and it was Sneaky Lou. So I guess I have
Oh,
that kind of surreptitious. I always wanted to be a spy. That was one of my secret desires, but that didn't work out. So I went for the writing.
yeah.
Um,
Journalist spy, same sort of thing,
yeah,
really,
it's
isn't it?
kind of on the same wavelength, right?
Yeah, it's easy. And as you started your journalist journey, what were some of the challenges that you faced in and I put this in a phraseology because we just read media, but we don't see what goes on in the back end as you're trying to write those stories and what stories actually people are going to read. Because again, it's a career pathway. You have people to reply to or respond to. How did you find that pace there before we shifted? You spoke about the people, which is great, but the job itself, what is that like?
Mm, the job itself is it's pretty brutal, actually, depending on what beat you have. Even if I had kind of a community general news sort of scope in my writing, and I'm really grateful I did because some people had the city council, right, or some people had crime, right, and what I saw was that it's a very people are very committed and driven. We unfortunately media has shifted to a corporate, right,
Yeah,
corporate institution, but really behind it are really great people who really do strive to seek the truth and print it, whatever their own biases might be. And we all have biases, right? But I saw that people were very hardworking and very determined to get to the bottom of things. I met some of the most incredible people. One I'm still very close to today. We exchange writing and read each other's work. So builds great relationships. And I think the occupation is very unforgiving in the sense of I would see people. One night I had a meeting that went till like midnight that I was covering for the newspaper. And the next morning there was like, it was at 5 a.m., that was my next story. So there was no break,
yeah,
right, for some of those stories. And that was true more for the other people in the newsroom because I was still a very young reporter. But I saw that it wasn't a career path from what I was observing that was very family friendly in the sense of you didn't have space to cultivate relationships or be at home even, right?
yeah.
So I think that was something I observed that I wanted to do something a little different than that. So,
Yeah, and I love that take there because we see lots of people that want to be journalists, and it's great. Storytelling is fantastic, and storytelling is amazing. But as you said before, when you live in a world where it's a corporate institute versus a person-centric institute, it just changes things just a little bit. In in the world in the modern worldview, there's a a saying that goes, "What's the most important thing in the world?" And it's the people, the people, the people. And I
Mhm.
think, we can safely say that at this point in time, that's being eroded in the way the media's looking at things. Yeah, that's my thoughts there. Any thoughts on that there?
Definitely, I would totally agree. Like, I think the corporate takeover of the media has really just been a disaster, right?
Yeah,
Because it becomes driven by interests, not by the truth.
yeah,
So I think that's made it really difficult. So much misinformation, disinformation, alternative facts, like things that just really are not journalism, right? So I think
yeah,
that makes it really challenging. People have to be really critical thinkers and read widely to know what the truth is. And I think unfortunately we like to confirm our biases, so we only read or watch the things that align with the things we believe, right? So I
yeah,
think from a former journalist perspective, it's like we need to do better than that, right? We need to
yeah,
take a broader view, read news from other countries, read news from the opposite side of the spectrum. So I
yeah,
think, yeah, the people are what make it
yeah.
valuable.
And I guess it's much harder now because, think about when I was growing up, and I'm sure when you were growing up as well, you could choose different news to watch. You had choice, but the choice
Mm.
wasn't 24 hours. It was okay, cool. News would be from
Yeah,
6 o'clock, and that's it. There was not 24 news cycle, so you just knew what was there. But now
right.
you just watch the same thing over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. And you're starting to create news, right?
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
if it's a 24-hour news cycle, you have to fill those hours, right? So you get
Yeah.
really bad reporting. You get people that are just reporting on things as they come in, reporting, quote, but they're actually just telling you what just came in. There's no reporting that's been involved, right? Because they have to keep the cameras rolling and keep the show going. So I think that's really been to the detriment. The 24-hour news cycle is not a
Yeah.
good thing.
And when I see you, I see a strong, powerful woman, in what you do. But what's it like for you in that field as a young lady, I guess, navigating not just the journalism, but also when you stepped into the speech writing as a young person?
As a young person, I'll be honest, it was overwhelming, right? It was overwhelming because you come in, the beauty of journalism is you're always free to ask any question. I think I love that about journalism. There really is no stupid question, right? That's your job is to
Yeah.
ask the question. So even if you know the answer, you still need to ask the question, right? So I think I came in a little insecure about that. So it took time to build up that security. And it wasn't because the environment was negative. It was just something internal that had to shift, that had to own, like, this is my space as well, and I can occupy it. Um, so I think it was a journey in terms of in my whole writing journey, coming to a place where I can really own my writing, own my creativity, and step out in confidence with it.
Yeah, and as you speak about that, when did that happen for you? Because and I ask when in quotation marks because we're always evolving, and I love the fact that you said it wasn't environment. Too
Hmm.
often we blame the environment, but sometimes we've got to go, like Tana said before,
Hmm.
internally. Where
Yeah.
does it come from internally?
Yeah. Where does it come from internally? The confidence in
Yeah,
my writing.
yeah,
I think one, it comes from practice, right? You have to keep, as they say, go to the woodshed and chopping wood, right? Like you just chop wood again and again and again. Otherwise, um, it's just practice. Practice makes perfect. It's muscle memory. And so I think being in different contexts, like, and then going to grad school and being able to write in all kinds of genres, whether it was screenplay, poetry, fiction, nonfiction, a little bit of technical writing, not my strong suit, but we did take a class in that. I think it was practice, being able to do that again and again and growing into my voice. And again, it was a process, right? Like what I wrote then, I would not write now because my voice has changed over time. So it's a growth process, and a sense of stepping into your own voice is a process, definitely.
yeah. And I'm just gonna touch a little bit into where you are now. So if we think about the growth process and we think about the cuts, um,
Mm.
what did you have to cut out for the growth process? Then you can also talk about what the cut is as well for our
Yeah.
listeners.
So I talk about a method called the cut method, and it's an acronym, and it stands for C, clarify your values, U, uncover the essence, and T, treasure the time. And what it is a philosophy that we must subtract to expand, and that we must make strategic cuts in order to live a life of poise and purpose. So I think what I had to cut was a lot of insecurity, right? You cut that through realizing, oh, I've just shut down my own voice, and that's not serving me well, right?
Yeah,
Um, I've had to cut ego sometimes, right? Where you just realize you need to be more humble, right? You cut perfectionism. I think I've really learned to lean into permission, not perfection. I think that's a very important distinction. And that's not to say you don't do excellent work, but you have to, especially as a writer, give yourself permission, right? If you don't let go of perfectionism, you'll never put anything out in the world, right?
100%. Yeah,
So I think perfectionism can be our undoing, and we really just need to give ourselves permission to take action. As we say, with clarity and confidence come with action, right?
yeah,
But I'd also say that clarity and confidence come with subtraction, right? We have to
yeah,
take certain things away to see more clearly. So that's those are different kinds of cuts I've had to make. I think that's the essence of what it is deciding what are my values in this context, what's most important, what makes me tick, what makes me get up in the morning, what do I want to be remembered for at the end of time, right?
yeah,
And what's the most important versus what's expected. That would be the uncover the essence, right? What's because essence is the very being, the central thing, the main idea, right? So
yeah.
what is that core thing? And then T, we have to treasure the time. We have to realize that life is short, and I have a really keen sense of life's brevity. So I think that's really informed the cuts that I make.
Yeah, and you know what's so beautiful about that there because as we started the podcast, Tane spoke about what his biggest learning was. And Tane, as you think about what Sneha said about the cut, how do you see that relates back to what you're going through right now?
Yeah, it definitely resonates with what I've been going through, and I think it's crucial to have that knowledge to have some meaningful, parameters of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve. Because I think sometimes we often just go, oh, it is the way it is, and we don't actually reflect on what we can, use the cut for. So it's very insightful for sure.
Yeah, as you said, Sneha and Tane, and I think myself as well, in our worlds we live with add. But actually, when you take away, you actually start adding more value to the things that you actually have in life.
It's so true. It's so true. We think cuts diminish us,
Yeah,
but they're actually enlarging us. We're making space for the most important thing. And so we can live larger, not smaller. We play a bigger, better game if we cut and focus on the one thing versus everything, right?
yeah. It's really funny when my coaching clients, I always say to them, when you try to do everything, you end up doing nothing.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
and it's so hard for us to cut because as you said, the biggest thing is ego. Ego is the biggest thing
Right.
that we all that's the number one thing for us to cut, and it's the hardest thing for us to cut.
Definitely, because we believe we get our value from what we do, right?
Yeah,
And if we believe that, then we constantly need to add things to our to-do list, right? Because that's where
yeah.
your meaning lies. But if we believe something different, then we have to act differently, right?
Yeah,
So,
totally. Totally. So
yeah.
true. And I love this cut methodology. How did that come up for you? Because as you said before, you journalist, you're writing speeches, which is all adding. It's all adding. If you think about where you've come from, you adding value to the world, you're adding content for people to speak about, you're adding when did you go? Actually, wait a minute. Let me start removing to add value.
Mm. I mean, I think it's been what I call a growing knowing, where it's repeated mistakes and then realizing, oh, I should do that differently next time. I think there have been times where I've had to, let's go to college, for instance, when I was overwhelmed. I was doing great in a class, but I thought, you know what? My health is more important right now. I'm driving myself into a ditch, and I am going to cut this class. Not cut as in not go, but cut as in just leave, unenroll from that class, which is when you're used to being a top student, that's not what you do, right? But
Yeah.
actually, I think sometimes that's the most important thing to do is realize your limitations and acknowledge, we're not as strong as we think we are. And that's okay. And also that we need to draw a boundary, right? And I think we need to remember no is a complete sentence, right? It's okay to say no to certain things and then get really granular, right? And also figure out, okay, what's important versus what's expected. So I think for me, burnout started really early in high school. I did a million things. I was like two hands, a dozen plates, right? So I was the baccalaureate soloist, graduation speaker. I swept the senior awards ceremony. I led the campus fellowship, choir, mock trial, girls' state, academic decathlon. My plate was really full, right? But I just realized at one point I was having canker sores, and that sounds like a minor thing, but I'd get so many that I couldn't eat or drink. Like it was just very painful for me, which is a sign of stress, right? Because
Yeah.
anxiety and stress can cause that. And so it was very internalized. Like externally, I was very poised and powerful, right? But internally, something was definitely going on for me. This latent anxiety, but you could see the anxiety in my mouth, right? So different things like that. And I just fell apart one day. I didn't even anticipate it. I just ran into a trusted teacher's classroom and I just fell into her arms weeping. And I didn't have words for what I was feeling, but I just cried and cried and cried. And I realized I am just overwhelmed. And I think college was a different path for me where I just limited the things that I did, right? Like, I think you really realize your limitations at a certain point, and if you burn out too early, you can't sustain that at a different time, right? So I think it's a real problem, and this is not going to get me invited to speak at any high schools, but I think it's a real problem, right? When we have this mentality of you need to add to be able to get into college, right? Versus like, why don't you focus on the few things that you're really good at versus just trying to accomplish a million things, right? And what you have is a burned out generation. So I think that's really sad, actually.
Yeah, and it's really powerful that you shared that there because, as I said before, you are strong, you're powerful, but we all have moments when life wasn't that way there. And, as you shared, you burnt out. And I love the fact how you speak about when I work in high schools and I have all these young people that want to do everything. You read their CVs, I'm like, what? When do you have time
Yeah,
to sleep? Like, why are you doing all these things here? And I think Tanya resonates with this as well. When people are doing things because they just put it on their CV because it's good for university, good for scholarships, good for, but are you actually living in the moment? And the thing is also schools are doing the same thing because if I see Sneha and Tanya that are doing all these things, I can put into my school prospectus and go, look at these amazing students. Come
right.
bring, back to the whole corporate thing that goes out there, which is quite sad. I think Tanya, we've spoken about this many times before about your burnout. As you hear about this, Tanya, what does that bring up for you as you hear how Sneha shares her story?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that you reflect on, and I think a lot of the times we talk about hindsight and how it's a beautiful thing, but I think and I think too it depends on your situation. For me, I think the one fortunate thing I had was support around me. I had supportive parents and supportive friends, so it was never a pressure to or an expectation to go and do that. I put the expectation on myself, and I think that's also another side of the narrative that we don't often talk about is the pressure we often put on ourselves to go and achieve these things or go and add these things. And it's not to say that it's right or wrong, but I think it's just to say, to learn how to manage that internal voice or that internal expectation that we put on ourselves to achieve or to, keep adding. And I guess to, as you mentioned, to actually question it and go, why are we adding it? Is there a reason? And sometimes there is, but sometimes there's, a bigger equation or a bigger context to look at as well.
Yes, that's so true. Thanks for adding that, Tane. And so now back, I'm going to use the cut analogy. What I loved about one of your sessions, you shared how you um chose not to follow the norms of getting married at a certain age, and you chose to get married later on in your life, which is great. Do you want to speak about that? Because as you said, you have your one and only husband, your first and your last husband. What is that like? And I said that because again, there's a narrative out there that you've got to tick certain boxes at certain ages and blah 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 blah. And you went totally against that there, which is great.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I got married in my 40s, which is not, especially culturally, coming from
Yeah.
an Indian background, that's you're considered expired after 35, right? So I think that was very difficult. It was a very difficult journey because there's a lot of external pressure culturally and socially. And I think I was stubborn. I think that's what really kept me going is I had a deep sense that it's not worth settling
Mhm.
for just just for the sake of getting married, right? And so I would meet people or see people and be like, they don't align with who I am. There's something there that's missing. And it's not that they need to be, have 20 things right with them and look like a GQ model and, those things don't last, right? And
Yeah.
I think I was aware of that from the beginning. But I did resist, and it was very, very hard because there's a lot of pressure for that. But I'm so glad I held out. I'm a big fan of waiting to your 40s and 50s to get married. I just can't endorse that enough because you grow into who you are, right? And you know who you want to be and who you want to be with. So I think it brings a lot of clarity, going back to the cut, like clarity is really important, knowing what you value. And it is such a process of elimination, really, right? That it reminds me of my dad always uses this story where Michelangelo is asked, how do you carve an elephant? And he says, I just take away everything that doesn't look like an elephant, right? So I think similar to dating and marriage, you take away everything that doesn't align with your values, right? And just hold out for the best rather than second best. And it's a tough road because culturally, society, not just Indian culture, but society in general,
Yeah.
right, is
Yeah.
very much your value comes from who you're attached to.
Yeah.
And it was worth the wait. It was worth holding out for the best. Um, we have a great marriage. It's peace is our central value, and that's been that's been peaceful. It's been very peaceful. And I think a lot of it comes from being wise and waiting until we found the right person, to who would match our values. And I think that was really, really critical. Was there another question in there
No,
that you?
I think that was it. I
Okay.
think that was another thing. And what I really would love to emphasize there is the fact that you spoke about finding the right person, but also it's finding yourself. As you said before, we don't actually know who we are. When you
Right.
are in your teens, you're trying to be cool. When you're in
Yeah.
college, you're still trying to find your way. It's only and when you have your first job, you're trying to find you're
Right.
trying to fit in as well. You're always fitting in until at some point you go, I'm not actually fitting in anymore. I'm just living my
Yeah.
life. And
Yeah.
that's when you actually realize who you are. And I think about that a lot of times. I think about, okay, when did I actually know who I actually was as a person?
Right.
And that happened in my late 30s. Before my late
Yeah.
30s, I was living someone else's world, someone else's life, because
Mhm.
either culturally I was just living the cultural norm, or I was too afraid to actually expose who I really was because you build up this whole persona of who you are. And then
This facade, right?
yeah, this
Yeah.
facade, and then one day you go, actually, wait a minute, this is not what I stand up for, and it's not
Mhm.
who I am. So I love the way you shared that story about, it's not just about finding the right person, it's about finding your values.
Absolutely. You have to
Yeah,
know who you are, what you stand for, in order to know who you'll best be matched with, right?
that's right,
So,
exactly, yeah. And have peace, right?
yes, have peace. Peace is
Uh,
important.
peace is totally important. And now, Sneha, as you navigate away from speech writing and thinking about where you are now, what are you most excited about over that's coming up for you? I know a book is coming up for you, but the speaking is coming up for you. As you think about Sneha as a professional and as a person individually, what are the two things that you're looking forward to as a person, as a professional?
Yeah, so I definitely have pivoted, and that's a great thing and a scary thing all at the same time, right? Because you don't know what you don't know, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's been very exciting to one, own my voice. I think I had cut my own mic for a long time because whether it was pain or insecurity or what have you, I was more comfortable amplifying other people's voices rather than using my own. I think I got really comfortable with that. And at a certain point, I realized, wait, I have things to say and things to offer that I don't need to be behind the curtain, right? I can also be on the stage, not in an ego way, but in the sense of I have something to offer the world and I want to give meaning and purpose to my career and to others around me, right? So I'm really excited about my book coming up, Cut to the Essence. It'll be out May 2026. You can, here's my shameless plug. You
Plug
can,
away.
here we go. Go to snehav.com. If you sign up, you'll get early access to my book. And I'll drop some chapters down the road and things like that. So would love to get a community to give me feedback about what I'm writing as I'm writing. So I'm really excited about the book because it's helped me unpack the cut in ways that I didn't anticipate. Because people think of the cut and they think of it as like a time management tool or an efficiency hack or decluttering your closet, right? But it's so much more than that. It permeates like every aspect of our life, and every decision we make is through the lens of our values, what's most important, time is short, right? All those things. Everything should pass through that filter. So I'm really excited about the book. It's been great. I will be done with my first full draft at the end of the month.
Hey,
And yeah, that feels like an accomplishment. We're going to celebrate after that.
yeah, you totally
And
should.
yeah, and then I'm going to set it aside for a little bit and come back to it, and it'll be out in May. I'm really, really excited about that. And it's been a fun process, not just as a writer, because as a writer, a book is the pinnacle, right, of your
Yeah.
career. You want to produce a book that is published and read. But it's also my act of resistance in some ways, in the sense of it's my recognition is probably the better word that life is short and I need to accomplish the things I want to do, because you only get one chance on this earth, right? So it's been great to kind of take it by the horns and like just really dive into it. And also, as an emerging speaker, I'm really excited to share this message on stages, right? And get people, hopefully help people think through their life in a different framework. And I'm really excited about that as well. It's an interesting time when everything is kind of stripped away and you look at the future and you're like, what is coming? I don't know. I don't know what my future holds. I believe someone holds my future, but I don't know what's coming, right? So it's a crazy, crazy ride, and I'm here for it.
Oh, yeah, jump on. Hey, jump on. This is great. And we'll chuck the your website on the in the show notes as well for those of you that want to have early access, because why not? Early access is great. Great. So now there's so much passion there in what you've just said. And one thing I want to touch on though is you've mentioned this a few times, is the concept of time is short and
Hmm.
death. Has there been something in your world that has made that a reality for you, or is this a realization through some other means?
Hmm. I think I had an early awareness of it because the passing of time has always been something I'm conscious of. But there was definitely a few occasions, very critical occasions where that hit home for me. Um, some years ago, my best friend's son actually died. He was 7 years old, I believe, when he died. He had a very rare disease called SCN8A. And what it meant was that he had severe arrested development and also seizures, um, pretty much all the time. And he couldn't stand, he wasn't verbal, couldn't walk. He would make certain sounds, and one of them said Auntie Snay, and they interpreted it for me. So then I learned to recognize it. So that was the sweetest sound in the world, right? Hearing him say that. He was just so full of joy, and we would FaceTime together and wiggle our noses at each other and, make faces and just a joy. So the loss of him was really tragic. I remember getting the phone call, and it just reminded me that we don't know how long we have, and we don't know, especially when a parent loses a child like my friend did. That's the inverse of what should be, right?
Yeah.
We prepare ourselves to bury our parents, but I don't think you're ever prepared to bury a child, right? So I think that really shook me. Also, there have been some illnesses that have touched my family. Cancer has touched my family. And I think when you get that that grave diagnosis, you realize, time is really short. What am I going to focus on? What am I going to set aside? What's really going to matter at the end of all of this? So, mortality is something I'm really aware of. And I think that's a great filter for my life because coming back to peace, right? If you have this filter of life is short, then is that argument really worth it, right?
Yeah,
Like, do I really need to harp on that item right there, or is it something worth letting go? Because in the scheme of things, it's not that big of a deal, right? So it comes down to those small things, but also the big things, the big choices we make. And yeah, the brevity of life is something that I'm conscious of all the time. My grandfather often said, recited a verse, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And I think that's really wise, that we realize we have limited amount of time and we should spend it wisely.
that's and I love that because I wanted to bring us back to that because you mentioned it a few times. And ironically, I was listening to a podcast the other day where the guest spoke about the fact that we're all dying every day. We're all
Mhm.
dying. This is it. The minute you're born, you're dying. The way you die, it could be a car accident, it could be a disease, it could whatever it is. But
Mhm.
we all live in an illusion that we're all immortal, and until something happens. And as your grandfather said, saying, but also as the Stoic philosophy of memento mori, remember that
Mhm.
you're dying. When you have that lens, as you said before, everything else just becomes really superficial. You think about when you go to work and you have this thing, you're like, actually, does it actually matter? I mean, in the bigger
Yeah,
scheme of life, it doesn't actually matter. And I love that you bring that into your cut methodology as well, because a lot of methodologies we have out there about being efficient and about being productive and increasing KPIs, increasing money, increasing all these things, these
right.
tangible things. But I
Yeah.
love how your T actually stands for, wait a minute, you're here for X amount of time.
Mhm.
And how do you make that X more valuable by reducing Y?
Sure. Like if we live to be 80, we have like 4,160 weeks of our life, right?
I
So
thought
when
you, I
you
thought you, I thought you were bad at maths, Sneha.
well, I did well in arithmetic, but algebra, that's another story. Algebra and above was kind of a disaster. But yeah, when you think about how short it is, it really puts things in perspective, right? And why do I need to accumulate, accumulate, accumulate? Maybe I should give, 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 right?
Yeah, exactly. And talking about well-being and health and all that kind of fun stuff, how do you look after yourself? What is your Sneha time?
Mm. We have a walking pad, probably best investment of the last couple years. It was really inexpensive on Amazon. I'm not doing a product placement or anything, and so I won't go further. But a great investment of I just get on that, and it's my time to sing. I turn the music up really loud. That's one way I do self-care. I pray on that walking pad. I sing really loud. My poor husband. So music is something that really takes care of me as a way of self-care. Walking is really great, especially because I take walking very seriously because I have a condition or have had a condition and is intermittent now, where sometimes I can't walk. And so I think I take every step as grace, right? So to be able to be on a walking pad the last couple of years has been a tremendous blessing because I have had times where I've had to crawl because I couldn't walk. So I think that's a mode of self-care that I don't take for granted. And I am very obsessive about nutrition. I am like the antioxidant queen, so I take nutrition very seriously, and I'm the annoying person that always has some tidbit about what this food does for you and doesn't do for you, or what vitamin you can get from that. So nutrition is one way of self-care as well.
Do you want to share one with us? Anything, just out of interest?
Well, chocolate is a superfood, as we all know, right? Dark chocolate. Um,
There we go. Dark chocolate. Here we
take,
go.
take your magnesium, very good, like 600 functions in your body.
Yeah,
So random pieces of information will come out in the course of a meal. Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, why not? Sharing is caring, right? Sharing is
Yeah,
caring.
exactly.
Oh, beautiful. I love that, we always ask our guests about, how they look after themselves because we all live busy lives. And as Tanya said just at the start as well, he's been to the gym 3 times this week here. And some people might go like, oh, only 3 times, where others
Mhm.
might go, wow, 3 times. And some might go, what's the gym, But it's really beautiful that, you've also shared that, your well-being. And it doesn't have to be the gym. It can be music. It can be singing. It can be whatever it is, but you've got to have time for yourself.
Absolutely. It's very important. I mean, to your title of baskets of knowledge, if our basket isn't full, right, we have nothing to give, right? So
Totally.
have to make sure that we're well taken care of,
Yeah,
definitely.
totally. Tanya, any questions for Sneha that you're pondering?
I think something I was just thinking about is where did the concept of cut originate from? Like, how did you, come up with the idea of this cut?
That's a great question. It came out of a lot of reflection, but it also came out of thinking back over my life. My dad was my inspiration for the cut. He's the most focused person I know. And I would, as I said, sneak into his office, but I would do that and I would climb into his arms when I was a kid and I'd watch him write in the margins, very distinct handwriting. And what he was doing was distilling things. He is a preacher, and so he was distilling different ideas and cutting them down to the essence, right? So I had that instilled, like you need to clarify certain things. And he's very focused, as I said. So I think all of it came together, whether it was the treasure of the time from the losses I've seen and experienced, uncovering the essence, was through realizing that sometimes we just have to get granular, right? And really focus on the most important thing because we get distracted by so many things. So it was kind of birthed out of my life, just various experiences that came to this realization of this is my framework for living, actually. And I think it's a pretty good framework. So I want to share it. And it, it serves me well. And I think it will serve so many people well.
Yeah, no, totally, totally. And I think, I really, really love how this story came about because as what I'm noticing is that it started very, very young. And I think this is an important reminder to all of us, I guess, listening that the stories we tell ourselves, the stories that we have developed over time, as you said, you were with your dad in his arms. And some of the times we don't stop and think about where this actually come from. Where does what I'm doing today actually come from? Why am I doing why I'm doing that? So it's a beautiful, I guess, throwback to your family and your father about the influence they've had in your life.
Yeah, definitely. Tremendous impact. Just great models of living with clarity, right? Living with purpose and living poised with strength. So they've
Yeah.
been a tremendous, tremendous blessing. Yeah.
Oh, which is wonderful. So now, are there
Yeah.
any parts of this that your story that we haven't shared that you'd like to share? Because there's only so much we can tell on the internet, but you live your life, and anything you'd like to share that we have left out?
Anything I'd like to share? I think I would talk just briefly about cut in terms of our words.
Yeah, sure.
Coming from a speechwriter writer perspective, I think about that a lot too. How we must weigh our words very carefully, like the weight of our words, and how we often need to cut the talk that we're giving to ourselves, our self-talk, and also the talk about other people, right? So I think that's really critical because, you can say a cruel word and it will not just leave, it actually lodges in people's heart, right? So I think really watching our words in terms of how we talk to people and even how we talk to children, right? And especially
Yeah,
I think about it from the perspective of a woman, like how I think it's so damaging that women talk so much. Part of it is society's problem, of course, but about their dissatisfaction with their weight, right? Because then young girls are thinking there's something wrong with me too, right? So they're hearing things that I'm not acceptable, I'm not worthy, all of these things, and it embeds in their psyche. So again, the words that we say have a lot of power, right? And I think we also need to remember how we're speaking to people. Maybe we don't praise them for their achievements so much, right? Because we've done very little when it comes to our brains, our beauty, or our brawn, right?
yeah,
Like that's just given to us. But maybe we should use our words to praise our character, our choices, the way we treat other people. So I think about that in terms of the cut too. Like what kind of language are we using towards ourselves and towards others? Like how's our self-talk? How's our talk to others? And how are we using our words, even as a writer, right? Like what am I
Yeah.
choosing to keep and what am I choosing to cut? Like editing is really important to the writing process, right? Like first drafts should rarely see the light of day. Like you really need to work on it and cut away what doesn't fit and what doesn't belong. So I think we need to do that in our language as well.
That is the world I live in now. That is the world where I just talk about language and words matter.
Mhm.
I always think about, I don't know if whether you've heard this nursery rhyme or rhyme where that goes, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. And I'm like, that is the totally wrong thing. And how
Yeah,
do we
it's
teach people
opposite.
this? And how it's the total opposite, right? And it's so powerful. Languaging matters. And as you said before, just by calling someone overweight or underweight or whatever phraseology, that label that you've given them is going to scar them. And you're not going
Mhm.
to see it, but it's going to hurt you more than a stick or a stone because you can't see
Absolutely.
it and it just festers away and festers away. And then one day it'll just come out and whatever that comes out as. So yeah, I think I love the way you have talked about the cut in terms of self-talk, but also
Hmm.
the words we use or don't use as well. Words
Right,
even not
exactly.
using words is just as harmful sometimes.
That's a great cut too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. No, beautiful. Sneha, I love that value add, and I'm so glad I asked you about that because that's a great way to segue into our final question. And I say final question because we can keep talking forever, but we've been on for an hour or so, and time is precious, and I know you've got things to do. But our podcast is called Parcels of Knowledge. And every week we invite our guests to share a piece of knowledge to put into our basket. Myself, Tane, and our listeners, you've shared some amazing pieces of knowledge. But is there any one piece of knowledge you'd like to leave us with as we close the podcast today?
Hmm. That's a great question. Give me 1 minute to pause. Not 1 minute. I won't take a minute.
That's right.
Um, I think, you know, I wrote this in my book, and I think it harkens back to something I said earlier, but I think whether we trip or whether we triumph, persistence beats perfection. And I think that's really important that we have to persist and that progress is more important than perfection. So I think embrace persistence, give yourself permission, and shed perfection.
I love that. Embrace persistence and shared perfection. What a beautiful piece of knowledge. And I think it's important for every one of us because how many times do we fail, using inverted commas, in the world we fail and then we just stop?
Mhm.
And how many times do we fail and stand up again and we grow? So I love that fact. Yeah.
Yeah, and excellence is not doing everything perfectly all the time, right? It's just doing the right things well and persisting. So I think it's not that we don't do things excellently, we just don't tie ourselves up into knots to do something impossible, right?
Yeah, totally. Because perfection is impossible. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Whether we like it or not, it's impossible. Yeah. Beautiful. Tony, any last words?
Oh, just a massive thank you, I guess, from me, to jump on the podcast. It's been very insightful, and I've definitely taken a lot away from what you've had to say, Sneha. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you both.
No
It's
worries.
been a pleasure.
Sneha, thank you so much for jumping on. As I said at the start, I know a snippet of you from our little interactions on SI, but today, I've really gotten to understand and know where the essence of CUT comes from, where the cut
Mhm.
comes from. And I think it's something that we can all take away in each part of our lives. Even if we implement one of those, whether it's the C, the U, or the T, it doesn't actually matter which one you implement. Obviously, all three is really great, but if you implement any one of those, clarity, your time on earth, and the essence. If you think about those things, it'll make your life so much more meaningful, I think. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for your time, and we'll put your link in the chat as well. Also in the show notes. But thank you so much for jumping on.
Thank you. It's been a
Now,
pleasure. Thank you so much
no,
for the
no,
gift.
no worries. For our listeners out there, hopefully you've learned something today. If you haven't, it's because you haven't been listening. Go back and listen again. Till next time, don't forget to keep smiling. Don't forget to put something into your basket of knowledge. And from today, don't forget to implement the cut. Until next time, take care, everybody. Ka kite. Peace. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Baskets of Knowledge.
Yeah, we hope that you found something useful to put into your basket of knowledge. And as we said before, remember to put something little into your baskets of knowledge every week. And as always, feel free to like, comment, and share this podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.